So let's head out to the hotline right now. I'm welcoming the Sixers TV play-by-play voice, and that is Marc Zumoff. Zumoff, what's happening, my friend?
Zach, it's all good. Temple Owls are everywhere. Great to hear you on the radio.
Well, thank you so much, and I do appreciate that. We'll have Aaron McKee joining us in a little bit, in an hour from now, so that'll be more Temple Owls on this radio station. But let's get to this. Everyone expects that Simmons is going to be the number one pick tonight in the draft. Why is this the right decision for the Sixers?
I think when you consider, first of all, his physical tools, you have a 6'10", 240-pound guy who could play anywhere on the floor. And in this day and age where the NBA is increasingly becoming positionless, you have a guy who has a lot of different skills. Physically, he's ready to play in the league. He just has that aura about him that seems to indicate that he would be a player that you would build around. Certainly, he's not the perfect player. No player is. But when you consider everything about him, not to mention the fact that he has a long relationship with the head coach, Brett Brown, going back to his days in Australia, meaning Brett, when he was a coach there, he coached his father and has a long history with the family in general. It just seems like there's a really good fit there. So barring something catastrophic, blue snow, as somebody once said in June, you're going to have Ben Simmons as the top pick in this year's NBA draft by the 76ers.
In this age of social media and also this age of sports talk radio, you know this, everyone has an opinion, and when you have to wait this long, everyone will put a player like Ben Simmons under a microscope when you have such an enormous decision that the Sixers have to make. We hear about the red flags about Ben Simmons. How did the Sixers do their due diligence on deciphering what the legitimate red flags are, Mark?
Zach, I think they already have, and I think Brett has a lot to do with that as it relates to his own personal relationship and having an understanding of him. I've seen now that Ben is out there and, PR people are doing their job to diffuse a lot of that stuff. There have been some explanations for why he, for example, didn't get his team into the NCAA tournament. They were only, by the way, one win away from doing that. All they had to do was beat Florida. They would have had 20 wins. They would have been in. As far as not getting along with his teammates, some have offered the explanation that before he got there, there was a core of players, and there were some seniors this year who, quite frankly, didn't think that they wanted to include him in their plans, and there was some selfishness going on. Some will tell you that perhaps the coach just wasn't good enough. So there are a number of different explanations to offer as to why LSU wasn't that successful. And it's also interesting that Ben actually chose LSU as opposed to Kentucky or a Duke or something like that, one of the more traditional basketball power schools. And his explanation is that he was willing to take on the challenge of playing for a non-traditional basketball school. So if you take that, there's someone who is willing to take on challenges, and clearly he has one with a team that only won 10 games last year.
The big rumor that's been circulating the last week has been that the Sixers are going to move up to number 3. Celtics will take Dunn, and then after that pick happens, there will be a trade, and you'll either have Okafor or Noel departing Philadelphia. Who do you think the preference is for the Sixers to keep if that rumor does turn out to be true?
I'm not sure exactly what they're thinking internally, Zach. Clearly, I think when you look at the two players, you say to yourself, okay, is Jahlil Okafor's offense worth more than Nerlens Noel's defense? I think you also have to try to consider what your roster is going to look like and what the best fit would be. Clearly, Okafor is the kind of player who will dominate the ball and needs the ball. You have a guy like Simmons who can get them the ball, so perhaps there's that fit. On the other hand, to have a guy who's a rim protector and patrols the lane as Nerlens Noel does, well, that has a resonating effect on your team and could be very valuable in the long run. A lot of that, too, depends on who Boston covets. The Celtics need big players. So that's one of the reasons why the Sixers are attractive, because they have a plethora of young bigs. And I think the important thing here to remember is that the Sixers seem to be confident in the health of Joel Embiid, at least at this point in time. with one of those big players. So I think that and the fact that they're hoping that Dario Saric will come over, another big player, gives them confidence that they, yes, can make that deal with Boston and trade one of those big players. As to which one ends up going, if at all, who knows?
We're talking to Marc Zumoff, the TV play-by-play voice for the Sixers. Does a great job on Comcast Sportsnet. And this is why I like the direction that the Sixers are moving in. You have to give credit to Sam Hinkie for acquiring all these assets. But right now it looks like Brian Colangelo is going out there and he's expediting this process and he's making those final decisions. I think that the Sixers, though, Mark, they're in good hands for years to come.
Well, I think when you look at the Toronto Raptors, which is a team that, quite frankly, only finished a game behind Cleveland in the regular season conference standings. They took the Cavaliers to 6 games in the conference finals. Of course, Cleveland eventually won it all. That was a team that was essentially built by Colangelo. He drafted DeMar DeRozan. He drafted Valanciunas, although Valanciunas didn't have that much of a factor in the playoffs because of injury. But he brought Kyle Lowry in. He essentially put that team together for the most part. So, and he also has a track record of turning teams around quickly. Now, you have to balance that with the fact that you don't want him to go out, and I don't believe he'll do this, but you don't want him to go out and just spend dollars willy-nilly on veterans and make you a 500 team and put you in purgatory, which is something that no Sixer fan wants. The reason that the team was willing to go through 199 losses in 3 years was to make that sacrifice so that they would have all the assets they have now. So I believe that when all is said and done, they will look to have at least 2 good young players that they can build around. Retain some of the guys they had from last year, try to surround Simmons with some shooters, and then sprinkle in some veterans who can help to, A, take the pressure off and be role models for the locker room going forward.
I like Brett Brown, and now he's entering his 4th year, and it looks like if the way the draft goes tonight, where I believe the Sixers get Simmons and Dunn, he'll have some legitimate talent on this roster with a player like Embiid, and if you have Sarge come over from overseas, why is Brett Brown going to be a good head coach? Because it's tough to determine how good of a head coach he is with the roster that he's been given the last 3 years.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with Brett. I think his knowledge of the game is remarkable, and quite frankly, when you are raised by a San Antonio Spurs organization, there is no better role model in terms of how to develop a culture, dealing with game situations, X's and O's. And, of course, Brett made his mark with the Spurs as a player development guy. Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Patty Mills, who was a native Australian, come to mind, people that Brett Brown helped along the way, helped to develop. So when you consider the fact that the team is young, he's a well-respected man. He understands the nature of an NBA locker room. I would like to think that he is the best guy, and hopefully he is for years to come.
How much have you been able to see of Joel Embiid?
Not too much, I'll be honest with you, Zach. I've really not made it my business to be at Sixers workouts. That's not to say that I couldn't. But from what I'm told, he is now participating in some 5-on-5, and apparently all the medical tests are positive on him. All the scans or whatever it is that is done in terms of diagnostic tools have turned up positive. Of course, you never know in this life, and you're dealing with quite a physical specimen, a guy who's well over 7 feet and about 250, 260 pounds. And we do know of big men in the past, Zydrunas Ilgauskas and Yao Ming and others who have had foot problems as big guys. But listen, so far so good, and I will tell you that what little I've seen of Embiid, and of course when he traveled with us during the year, when he did one-on-one work and whatever, highly skilled. Now, he hasn't played organized basketball in a couple of years, and he only played 1 year of college, and even that was abbreviated because of the back issue. So there's no telling what you're going to get, but good young man, likes to compete, and seems to have all the tools to be a pretty good player one day.
Will you drink a pitcher of Shirley Temple with him when he makes his NBA debut?
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. He could drown me with the Shirley Temple. I'll love it when that day happens. It'll be a long-awaited day for sure.
Wrapping up with Marc Zumoff, who joins us right now. So take me back to what you remember when Allen Iverson got picked first overall.
Well, it was we were just wrapping up our time at the old Spectrum, which, of course, does not exist anymore. And the Sixers had a draft party, and thousands of people were there, and many of the people were on the floor of the Spectrum. And I remember shortly after the pick was made at what was then Continental Airlines Arena in North Jersey, Pat Croce, who was only in his second year as president of the organization, came out onto the floor to speak to the crowd. And I just remember him going through the crowd, and it was like Caesar, where all these people were, I mean, literally a sea of people surrounding him, just trying to touch him and high-five him. And, of course, Pat, he reveled in that stuff. He was all about plunging into a crowd and high-fiving people. And I'll just never forget that image of Pat in a sea of people trying to make his way to a center court podium to address the fans after the selection was made.
And he's going to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame coming up in September. I think he's getting inducted September 8th that weekend. What's your favorite memory of Allen Iverson? Because he's such an enigma of a person, but a lot of people I talk to absolutely love the guy.
Yeah, I would actually challenge the description of enigma. I think, quite honestly, we know what Allen is and what he's about, certainly as a competitor. And I don't believe that there will ever be a competitor like him, just in terms of his physical tools, what he did, the way he played. I think a guy like maybe Russell Westbrook is the closest that I can come to. But two things certainly come to mind. One, the relationship with Allen and Larry Brown, and Larry's genius as it related to putting Allen in a situation where he could thrive, and that was certainly the 2001 team where there were just a bunch of blue-collar guys and Allen, and they got all the way to the finals. And one game that always comes up is our first home playoff game that was back in the lockout season of '99, where Allen had an NBA record 10 steals, and I don't think anybody in the place sat down the entire night. And the Sixers beat the higher seed in that game, the Orlando Magic, and went on to upset them in the playoff series. And then one particular play I remember, and I want to say it was that lockout year as well. The Sixers were playing the Indiana Pacers, and Allen Iverson was a one-man press against the Indiana Pacers in their backcourt, and he was just hounding Mark Jackson. And the fans just sort of sensed that something special would happen, and the Sixers were in the midst of a run of play, and the crowd was in a frenzy, and Iverson was dogging Jackson all over the floor, and he finally stole the ball from him and fed your guest tonight, Aaron McKee, in the corner for a three-pointer, and the place erupted. So just a little bit of what I remember from Allen Iverson, but there's certainly many memories, if we had all night, that I could recall.
We've had so many all-time great broadcasters in Philadelphia. Marc Zumoff, you're one of them. Thanks so much for the time today. We appreciate it.
You're kind, Zach, and all the best, and good luck with your new venture there.